Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Black Coffee Comics Podcast. It is I, your lovely host, Ty Black and Culture, and here with me, your other lovely host,
Space Lloyd 8.
And welcome again. Just again, thank you guys so much for your support. If you're new to this podcast, hello. We review comics and other types of sequential art such as manga, webtoons, comics, and more. And we have an amazing rating system. Lloyd, why don't you break down the rating system to them?
Yeah, so we have the way that we rate our comics is based on kind of levels of caffeine. So the same thing that you might be enjoying while you indulge in our reviews. So it all comes down to what the comics that we review may leave you with. So you have the blonde roast as a very base, where, you know, I might not even finish the issue that I'm on, let alone the series. One that leaves a lot to be desired. That can use a lot of improvement. Right above that, we have medium roast. So for those, it may be one that it's not necessarily like horrible, and it may leave some elements to be desired, but I would at least finish the issues or the set that I'm on currently. And then above that, though, you have blonde roast, which have either a refreshing take or they tackle subjects or elements well. So you definitely would love to read or finish and to see all the way through. But then above that, we have the espresso tier. And with espressos, it could be something that reinvents the wheel, something that's so refreshing to see that you got to even tell your friends about it. Ones that we can't wait to share. That's the absolute cream of the crop.
Absolutely. Just by the way, it's dark roast. That's the bottom tier. It's okay. I didn't want to interrupt while you was giving the review breakdown. But anywho, let's go ahead and get into the books, the comic books on the coffee table. I am tongue-tied already. Goodness gracious. Today we were reviewing Tuskegee Heirs Volume 1, which was written, or the story is by Marcus Williams and Greg Burnham, the art by Marcus Williams. And we are also doing a search for Sadiqah as well. For Search for Sadiqah, who's the story and art by? If you could remind me, Mr. Lloyd.
The story and the art for Search for Sadiqah, starting with the writer, also Greg Burnham. The line work for it was done by Shannon Sapenter and then Patricia DeGeisen. And then coloring and lettering was by Patricia DeGeisen and cover art by Marcus Williams.
Oh, snap. So we'll go ahead and get started with Tuskegee Heirs first, and give you that. So, I don't know, Tuskegee Heirs is hard for me to describe for some reason, like in like a brief overview. But Lloyd, I'm gonna give the overview and you let me know if it's kind of on point. So basically, Tuskegee Heirs takes place in a somewhat distant future, not too far ahead of where we are here in 2022. Technology has definitely flourished, blossomed, and excelled anything that we have here in the now. And also during this time, there's been some wars and things, some conflict as things happen, and we have our protagonists, this group that is called themselves the Tuskegee Heirs. And what are their names? We have Slip, Genesis, Ayana, Omar, and what's
Abel.
Abel, thank you. I don't know why I forgot it. And Abel, who have now basically joined together as this pilot air fighting group against the IUF. Basically this group that is trying to prevent them and stop them from doing what. That's where I say like my memory is a little bit foggy with this. I'm not exactly sure what it is they're trying to stop, but whatever they're trying to stop, they are working very hard to do so.
That just about sums it up.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything. There are some other details I could give, but I feel like it would spoil the story, so I'm not going to do that. I want you to read the story for yourself. Let's go ahead and get right into the review. So starting off with the artwork. What are your thoughts on the artwork?
I would definitely say overall for the artwork for Tuskegee Heirs, I feel like it carried the entire it's so strong, it's so dynamic that it carried the entire composition. Usually you try to find that balance and unity between the artwork and the story, but inevitably one may have more pull than the other. But from the cover art that I had seen before getting an opportunity to read it, to page after page of keeping that same level of expertise, it was something that had me so excited to read it just because I looked at it on first impression. Cover art is dope. The action scenes, they flow really, really well. I love the designs of how they have some of the planes, old and new. The characters themselves with their different hair textures and styles. The color palette also works with, like, it's all within. So the line work for the characters, the color choices where the right things are supposed to pop at the right time, from bullets. Can't tell if they're really bullets or lasers, but they're
definitely more like laser beams, laser bursts than bullets. I don't think I saw a single bullet in the art.
Well, I think the Colonel Mars, who brings all the kids in. So I think he might have bullets, but they don't look different. It looks like an old school shotgun, but it just doesn't have like a bullet spray.
Yeah, he has like the triple barrel like shotgun thing, but it doesn't have bullets. It's like a laser gun.
Yeah, but I mean, besides that, I really did appreciate how good the artwork is. Like, really, really big kudos to Marcus Williams. You could tell he took the time to really do the idea justice.
Absolutely.
Now, as far as like on that, what about for the like the layout for like the page flow and things like that? How do you think it worked?
I think I like the page flow overall. When you're talking about page flow and basically how you get from one scene to the next, I think it does a very good job of placing everything where it is. You don't have to necessarily guess where the next movement is going to come from. If a character starts to the left, they're going to end up on the right. If a ball is thrown from the right, it's going to end up on the left. Or you can see that there was time taken in making sure that the page flowed well. So definitely like the page flow. I think the layout is pretty comprehensible. However, I did see there was a formatting issue. I don't necessarily think that's like an art thing. It's more like a final production type situation. I have the volume 1 book, so it's like has issues 1, 2, and 3 in it. In the volume 1 book, in issue 3, there's 3 pages, so it'd be 6 pages front and back, where the formatting was off, so the page was blown over a little bit, so there was some text cut off. For me, it's not like a huge picky thing that I'm gonna grill anybody over. One, because I've seen professional publications that have years in the game that put out a book, sometimes the formatting is wrong. Books that should have no issues, sometimes they do. And it's a small indie company. Not saying that forgives anybody for anybody who's gonna harp on those kind of things, but that's just not something that I'm gonna put a lot of emphasis on. However, it is a really important thing, I think, for final production, for the overall look of your book, when you're publishing something, to make sure that your formatting is good on every page. So I'm not sure exactly, maybe it's just my copy, but that is something I noticed when I was going through. But everything else, like you said, I like the art. I think the art does a really good job of balancing a lot of different elements of perspective, art, color palette, character design. Everything was just, the art had almost no notes on this art. The art is top tier. It's about as best as you can get from an artist. Really wonderful work.
Yeah, the art, and more art.
Right, the art. Almost every page I wanted to make a poster out of and put it on my wall.
They even play with it really well for some parts. Like there are some gems in there, like in issue 2 and in issue 3. You can kind of tell what movie they pulled an idea from.
Oh yeah.
And the way that they portrayed it looked really, really cool. Whether it was an explosion in the background, somebody's pressed against the clock to accomplish one mission and objective, it's really cool how they played it. And I love when an artist can do Black people hair. Anybody can do a flowing, elegant Palomino elf. It's just easy to have it flow, look like it's in the wind. But when you have not only one texture, it's not like everybody had an afro. Everybody had their own personality expressed in their character design, which kind of transitions to the character and like background dedication, because it's tricky. We've had some comics that we reviewed here where you can tell that the passion stopped at the concept art. And usually for comics, you can tell that because the background doesn't get as much effort or dedication as the characters themselves. You don't get that here.
The way that you said that sounded hurt. It came from a place of pain.
It hurts to watch it. It hurts to read it.
Let you know that, friend, I'm here for you.
No, it's I'm just saying. You know. We've been there.
You're definitely not wrong. One thing I will say I really enjoyed about this character design, the character design is that, as you mentioned, the characters definitely have very unique designs. There's clear height differences. I even like the definition on the characters. Like these characters, like I mentioned, they're to elaborate a little bit further. These characters are not just like fighter pilot people. They have some basic military training, and they really, you can tell that they train. You can tell that they've done the pull-ups and the push-ups, or at least that they have a background in some kind of physical activity. Because there's definition in their body. You can see their muscles outlined. You can see their physiques, but it's nothing like super. These are relatively children. Maybe I say relatively. No, I don't. Not like preteen, but like that mid to late teens, maybe like 15, 16 kind of age, almost 17. So they look like kids, and I think that's always really nice to show that you can draw children that are physically fit, that are Black, that have different hair, that have different skin textures, body shapes, and it doesn't have to be weird. You don't have to make it weird, Mikasa, but also you don't have to make it look really cartoony and childish. And you don't have to make it super cartoony, childish, and like super playful. All of these things can come in, be very in a very mature way. So I really like the character designs. I also like the Colonel design. What's his name? Colonel Mars. He's like Colonel the guy. Mars. As you mentioned, he brings all the kids together. I like the fact that he was like this. He was this big man, like this tall, dark-skinned, chocolate, just man, had broad shoulders. You could tell he probably benches like 450. That's 2 humans on each side. Man's a rock.
Yep. Okay.
Man's a rock. Is that something? Yes. If I say he's a rock? Yes, it is. Okay,
by
well,
definition.
SIMP squirrels in my pants. Here I am.
But you're not wrong. I will say though, one thing that I didn't that seemed off for me, because now we're switching into what did the cover art do? Did it match what you had in the content? Now, even though the art style is consistent for the issue that for the volume that we got, the very first cover art, which covers the whole book, has each of them with their own unique super sci-fi looking weapons, which you don't see in any of the first 3 issues. So when I first went in, I'm like, oh, I'm geek. Oh, this is Tuskegee. But no, they got future weapons. One of them has a crossbow, another one has sword and a sickle. Where are they? And by the end of issue 3, I was still like,
gun.
Yeah, a machine gun. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna see this at some point. I don't know how it's gonna fit, but I looked forward to seeing the contrast between their old school, like red-tailed, respectful uniform and this futuristic weapon that never shows up. Not any of the five. So there was an expectation set from what you first visually see that doesn't happen elsewhere. It might happen in issue 4 or 5.
Hey, that's what I'm saying. Perhaps it'll happen later. Perchance.
But it doesn't show in the first 3. And that's the one that it prefaced with. So why not save that art for 4 and 5?
Sometimes in cover art, sometimes in cover art, they may do something that doesn't happen yet, or it is planned to happen. I mean, I get you. It definitely does set a different expectation. However, from my knowledge of like covers, sometimes the covers that you do have nothing to do with the story, or sometimes the cover you do is like foreshadowing for something to come. So like, if you were expecting those futuristic weapons that are on the cover, you're not gonna get them. However, like,
then why put them there?
It's not some. I get you. I'm not saying you're wrong, but for me personally, that would not be something I hold against the book. Only as like I would say perhaps maybe next time use a different, because I think this is like the base cover volume that you can get for this because we got it off the Kickstarter. So
this is like final production from Kickstarter.
Well, at least the copy I got, it was got off of Kickstarter. So
gotcha.
If you were to go on their website, you can see, so like the volume cover is different from like the issue covers. So like issue 1, you'll see that the cover fits the issue better. Issue 2, the cover fits that issue. I think it fits the issue better. I think the issue covers definitely fit it, but the volume covers maybe is more like foreshadowing for something to come next. I can't really say.
But just for the cover art that we saw.
Right, I get where you're coming from though.
Don't promise it, because I can't be the only one that's like, oh, what happened to that machine gun they had variant art covers as well that they could have used. So it's just one of those things, like, I know this wasn't the only art that you had, but it was one that had elements that might not have made it to the final cut or the final floor. So it would have just been that much less to bring up or to notice if you just picked a different choice, because the other ones were just as good. Some of them even had like a little bit less cartoonish and more deeply shaded and kind of gritty kind of look, which could have worked too. So, but yeah, I did overall for the art. It was cool.
Yeah, art's still 10 out of 10. I wouldn't even say 9 out of 10. The art is literally 10 out of 10. But now that we've gone over all of the art, that does push us directly into the story contents, which my personal opinion, that's where I kind of have some issues with the story. I gotta be transparent with y'all. It took me a while to get through this book. I read through it. I read through half of the first issue once. I finally read through the full first issue a little while ago, but I think yesterday and today is the first time I've read the whole book all the way through. I will say in general, it's not because the book is bad. I don't think the book is bad, and I'm being completely honest and transparent. And I don't even think it has to do with the book not being made for me, because sometimes, like when I reviewed Berserker, I said maybe that book just isn't for me. Or, for whatever reason, there's a handful of books I just don't connect with. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's attributed to 2 things. The first is I feel like the book moves at breakneck speed to get to its points. And there are some elements of the story that don't quite make a lot of sense. And not just like, oh, they're holding off this information till they get to the next issue, but just like story elements that even when you get to that next issue, you're just like, well, why didn't I get this information earlier to kind of confirm what comes later?
But Ty, the art. What do you mean?
The art is beautiful, and I think the story is good too. But like, prime example, like when I was giving the overview, like I couldn't really give you like what this story is about. Like, be honest with you. Can you tell me what Tuskegee Heirs is about? Like, without looking at an overview, can you tell me like linearly what the book is about? Like,
What it has?
what is the end goal?
No, I don't.
And
I don't necessarily have an idea. I think in their timeline, from what I read, because when I did pick it up, and I was anxious. I was anxious to get to page 1, and I saw the artwork. I saw the direction of like where it looked like they were setting it up. They got this new kid on the team. They got Abel on the team.
right.
People that there were 4 of them that were already experienced. They already had some kind of chemistry. And dialogue is everything for me. How your characters talk to each other is what really weaves together the fine fabrics. Kind of lost me a bit there, but then again, the art, and I don't know what they're fighting. There is though this group in their world. I guess flying is forbidden, so you're not supposed to be able to fly planes. It's specifically a government federal thing. And then there is, without giving away too much, there is I guess I don't even know why the airspace is restricted, honestly, but whenever they
International Unified Federation,
so whenever,
like I mentioned, there was a war that had happened that I believe is the reason why that airspace is now restricted. Of course, none of this information is super confirmed, but there definitely was some kind of,
it's kind of a dot in this thing, but it's kind of important. It's something that can't be breezed over. Like, why is all airspace restricted unless you're part of the IUF? So are they just sky patrol cops? Why, why? And like, what would be the purpose of assembling these 5 kids that are great with planes? What are you assembling them for? Is it just to fight the IUF? But then you have Colonel Mars, who's thrown into the mix, and then you have questions for him as to why did he separate from this super secret group?
Right, because he was a part of the IUF, and he saved one of the characters. When they were super young. So it's just like there's a lot of dots in the story. Like, I think that the concept of fighting against this government organization in which airspace is restricted, I like that. I have no scraps against that. And I even think the story flow wasn't too terrible. Like, I liked the onboarding of the new character Abel into the group, but just like you had mentioned, there were some dialogue issues that I was just like, not sure how I feel about these kids interacting. Now, it didn't sound like adults talking, I can say that. The kids sounded like children. They sounded like teenagers in that age group. So definitely the readability, it didn't sound like like an adult perception of a child. These did
I could agree with that. I agree. It wasn't like an old person speaking as a young person.
Correct.
It's like, hey, younger folks, do you like to do this popular dance? It wasn't forced.
Whipping nay.
Right. So let's switch into that part. So if we're talking about the overall plots and the flow or the story, let's focus first on the characters, since they've come up.
Right.
So from first impression, it looked like they were establishing Slip as kind of the goofy, reckless comic relief, right? Mm-hmm. Because immediately they're like, all right, we'll get information. No thanks. And then he goes down like, oh, that goofy guy, right? Then you have Ayana, who is right under Colonel Mars as like the leader of these first 4.
That would be, is that Ayana or is that
Ayana? Genesis with the glasses is not the leader of them. Not from what they initially start as. I think Ayana is also Colonel Mars's.
That's his adopted daughter.
His adopted daughter. Yeah. So you have Ayana, who's the leader. You have Slip, who's kind of the goofy one. You have Omar, who's super smart. But I think he almost gives more of the dependable, quote unquote, strong one.
Yeah,
they're like,
there's
that part with Genesis, because Genesis is the one that has the glasses, but she shows her combat prowess, but she shows that she's calm under pressure. So like, she's the last one to break her cool, but she fights as well as the rest of them.
She would be like for my Sailor Moon fans, she's the Ami of the group. She's definitely a Sailor Mercury. Smart, intelligent, but also capable, with the hands. I think Omar is more like a like you said, strong, dependable, but he's more like he's like the Kuwabara if you watch Yu Yu Hakusho. He's like the second in command. Like if Ayana's not there, Omar is there to basically hold the group down.
Yeah, yeah. At least that's how it starts.
That's how it starts.
That's where my critique starts to come in, because by the time you get through issue 2 and 3, then they all blend, and they don't. Each character doesn't seem really distinct from another. I say that because there were after Genesis, after like issue 2 or issue 3, since we're diving in really deeply, some of the there's this part of dialogue where I guess they lost or they didn't know what to do next because the cover was blown, and the first person to freak out isn't Slip, who shows that he's not serious. It's not Omar, who's the second in command. It's Genesis, who 2 seconds ago was fighting somebody twice her weight and was like, oh, he has a lot of wasted movement. Oh, I could do this and I could take him down. This was no problem. And she's thinking so calmly while she's fighting someone. But then there's a quick question in the group, and she's the first one that's like, we need to get all of this together. Like, if you're going to establish her as the cool Sailor Mercury head, and you're only 2 issues in, why break that? So the initial establishment of each of these individual characters doesn't get followed through enough for them to be distinct. And I don't know if that's
not enough. There wasn't even enough buildup of like, as far as like the characters that we know about, we get full on like we get to know Ayana. We know Ayana has one really cool feat that she does in the story where she saves someone, and it's absolutely badass, like action movie style work. She gives the work. Ayana gets her feat of the book, of the second, where Lloyd was saying, where she flips somebody over, does like the judo arm hold, like it's super dope.
Judo chop.
Abel gets his time in the first issue when he first joins. Slip even gets his moment. Maybe not necessarily like a feat, but we get to know a little bit more about his character when he's getting beaten up by mosquitoes in issue 2. Like we get to see the character. But what did Omar do?
Omar rescued Genesis, but he had like 2 words. He doesn't really do much. He's just there. Much.
And like, I think you have 5 main characters that you're dealing with, and we really only get to explore 4 of them, because Abel we meet at the beginning,
and it revolves around him for the most part.
It's like basically Abel is the main character, seconded by Ayana. Then of course, it's like Slip and Genesis are kind of in the background. But we don't see Abel do much of nothing. Abel's kind of just like a passive player in his own story, which is it's not annoying. It's just more like it's kind of like wasted potential. It's definitely giving Chad vibes from like Bleach. Like you've got this guy who,
right hand of the father, left hand of the devil, and nothing.
It's just like you've got this guy. And like, I have no doubt that Omar is literally that guy. The way that he carried himself in the first issue, he definitely gives off the vibes that I can lay down the law. But we never see him lay down the law in the first 3 issues, which is, I always like to say, well, let me not judge something too hard until I've seen the rest of it. But like everybody else in the first 3 issues has had at least some kind of feat or something to define their character, it's sad that Omar didn't get that opportunity to shine in any kind of way, maybe like a deep introspective or a moment, like they're around a campfire, and I don't even think he says 2 words during that whole situation.
I can't tell how half of them came to see or meet Senator Shields. One of them was adopted by him. The other one got driven to the base but
Are you talking
slipped.
about Colonel Mars?
Yeah, Colonel Mars. So with Colonel Mars, Ayana was adopted. Abel was driven there to like set the tone. Omar, no clue. Genesis, no clue. Slip, no clue.
Also, there's this interesting blurb of dialogue that happens in issue 2 between Ayana and Abel, where Ayana asks Abel, how did you learn, like, basically, how did you learn to fly so young? That's that. I think it's almost a word for word. And it made me stop.
No, she said at such a young age. Right,
yeah, at such a young age. How did you learn to fly at such a young age? But visually, they've got to be, if there is an age difference, they literally cannot be more than 2 years tops. With Ayana being like 16, Abel being like 14. And I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. That's also that is kind of weird.
Way that they cannot that they can have such a big age difference or any and don't get me wrong, I had to think about it. I was like, okay, let me put myself in my 16-year-old shoes, and I look at somebody who's younger than me.
They're the same size, by the way.
Right, they're the same. They're basically they're like, they could be brother and sister at age-wise, like maybe a year apart. So there's literally like,
you're so young. Sense. How did you do it? How old are you? Just as old as you.
It makes no sense story-wise for her to have that line of dialogue. What would have been a better line of dialogue instead is had she said, oh, well, how did you learn to fly so well? Because only thing that he'd done in the story was use VR equipment to fly. How did you learn to fly so well without a real plane? That would have made more sense story-wise, because he states at the beginning of the story, the only way I've ever learned to fly was through VR. That's a better statement to me. That makes more sense. But
that, or giving that dialogue text to someone actually older.
Right.
Not Colonel Mars, though, because he already saw the potential before the issue started. But someone,
when they broke out the senator, but also the senator took over his plane. And you
knew
know,
how to pilot that mug too. So
I'm not trying to spoil nothing.
Question. So if they're fighting the International Unified Federation,
yes,
but the senator has a political position.
Senator Shields, we don't know what we know that she's a senator, but of what we know not of.
Of what and how important is she to
we don't even know what the Unified Federation is of what? Unified Federation of the International Unified Federation.
That poses a whole nother thing. This person was important enough for you to face robots, other kids in remote controlled planes.
No, not other kids. Other kids came later.
But this whole enemy side, those same robots were there with the kids. So it's from that side. Sure. IUF has their own kids. But when they blow up those planes, nobody's in them because they're controlling theirs remotely.
That's true.
You're fighting this whole enemy side to get to this senator that's in this apartment, Suicide Squad style. But we don't even know why she was important. She wasn't married to Colonel Mars, from what I can tell. She didn't have... She's
basically like the brains, but like that makes sense because she's like, later on we find out like she built a good portion of like the stuff. She's like the brains behind the operation, so to speak. So like she's definitely important, but as far as like what position she holds for them to call her senator, is she just senator in name because I thought it was a cool namesake to give her, or is she like an actual physical senator? That we don't know. But I mean,
her first name was Senator.
I mean, her first name could be Senator, but they specifically call her the Senator in the.
But I don't call you the Blaque in Kulture. It's like, if that's going to be her first name, the first name, last name.
You know, there's just this story just has so many interesting, like, okay, so like real talk, brass tacks here. The story isn't bad. I think this, and I'm not even like trying to hype it up, like trying to save it. Like, I don't think the story is bad, but what pulls me out of the story, one, the pacing, I think I mentioned it earlier, is so gosh darn fast. In the first issue, it literally feels like I'm whipping my neck around because we introduce Abel starts flying, then now they're on their first mission, literally in the first 6 pages of of the comic.
Yep.
All the character building happens later on. I'm just like, whoa, wait a minute. He just got here. Like,
Yeah.
if you're the new kid and like a group of 4 friends, there's gonna be some, like, maybe not abrasion, but there's always like that little bit of like, I gotta get over being the new guy in a situation of 4 established friends. You got four
You know, it
people.
would have been cool if he was mid combat, but since he didn't have combat training, he gets overpowered. And then Omar steps in and just manhandles a guy and is like, we know you haven't been trained on that yet. Or they're trying to do a formation and he doesn't know what that formation's name is called, even though he's
Right.
this expert. Instead of throwing in a Gundam transformation out of nowhere, oh, we're
It
in
was
these
a
old
Gundam
school
transformation.
planes while the other side has these super high tech planes, but we're old school and we still could whoop them, right? Something where it's like they have to overcome it to prove that chemistry can be built. Or what about when Genesis actually gets shot down? Why was that not everybody's first mission?
No, they tried. Remember, they went to so in the first issue, when they're in their training simulation, there's like these robots. They come. Genesis's plane. That's how it goes. Genesis's plane gets shot down, and she gets shot down some miles out.
Yep.
During that time, basically, they tried to go and get Genesis. Like, they start freaking out, like, "Yo, can we go get her?" And basically, Colonel Mars and Gina, she's like the mechanic of this story. They say, "No, don't worry about it. You've got bigger fish to fry." And then that's why I said, well, that's breakneck speed, because we just saw someone get shot out the air, and now we're talking about we gotta go save homegirl. What are we doing here? So confused. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
They could have taken an issue and just seen that would have been a dope side thing. Where like at least for half an issue, we see Omar save Genesis. He's been silent and stoic this whole time. He could have been the completely quiet one, right? Completely
right.
quiet until all the side bubbles that usually a narrator has. Now it's Omar's thoughts while he goes down, saves Genesis. And like this is their brief, like, okay, he's been quiet, but here's a hint to how serious and how dependable and sturdy he is. And then after his exposition, now it makes sense why he's quiet for the rest of the thing. You know, I think from what we can tell is the expectation was exceeded by the art. But for the storyline, especially from maybe it's because it's a Kickstarter and you want to show and reward the people that fund you directly, because it's not just a production company or a studio, this is people. Maybe you set so many promises, i.e. showing enough action, showing enough stuff that's like, oh gosh this, oh gosh that. No, but maybe not. But like we can tell from the writing, there are so many different elements that didn't have time to get fleshed out. So we have these characters that just blend together after the first issue. Like basic introduction, first, everybody gels. I guess everybody has chemistry. Anybody can say these dialogues.
I mean, technically, they don't really have like much of a choice by the end of it. I'm not gonna say why, but like, I definitely agree with you. This art precedes the story, but the reasoning behind that, I don't think has, well, just from like my knowledge of Kickstarters, yes, it is often where when you launch your Kickstarter, you're typically anywhere between 50 to 60% done with your book. Sometimes people have a fully finished book and they launch their Kickstarter just so they can kick back some of the funds from it. But depending on how the artist runs the book, for 3 issues in a Kickstarter, I can't remember how long it took for the rewards to come out, but I would almost be certain to say that I think that this story was completely done, if not like the last little bit of coloring needed to be done in this book by the time the Kickstarter was backed and funded. So I don't think the Kickstarter is the issue. I think it fundamentally comes down to a script writing, and overall, it's a writing thing that needs to be addressed in issues going forward. I think that. And I can only speak to this I speak to this from experience, and I speak to this from a place of understanding, because even though I haven't said it, I am currently working on my own comic book right now. It's really difficult, especially because Marcus, who did the art, also did the story. So I know that he's an artist doing a story, and I always tell people there's two different ways when you're making a comic book. There's two different perspectives. There's the writer that's making the art. There's the writer that has to connect to the artist to put out a story, and there's the artist who wants to put out their own story and tries to do it that way. When you're the writer and all you have no artistic ability, the only thing you do is writing. 9 times out of 10, the writing, you can tell that there's a different essence to the writing, because that writer has spent gosh darn years poring over each and every sentence of their story. I'm not saying
we're
this
circling around to the same thing. It does pretty much reiterates that point that you could tell an artist, the artist portion had the expertise, but the story couldn't.
He could have definitely took a little bit more time in the script writing. I saw that he definitely had help writing the script from Greg Burnham. If I'm not mistaken, did Greg also work on Search for Sadiqah? Because I know that
he did. Yeah, no. Greg Burnham, Shannon Sapenter for the line work.
Greg Burnham was the main writer for Search for Sadiqah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Greg Burnham was in there too.
So he had help with the writing. So I think that definitely the story is not awful, and you can tell that there was love put into it. But I think maybe 2 more weeks on a writing workshop, sitting down, fleshing out that script a little bit better, and overall I think he'd have a phenomenal product, because the art is already 10 out of 10 no notes. If we can just get that story, flesh out some of those story elements with the characters and the storyline,
just take more time. Take more time.
Honestly, the art is so good. I am willing.
Not talking about the art. I'm saying for like there could be an issue dedicated to like some of these elements that rush. Like some questions need issue answers, and it doesn't take away. I would wait for if he had a storyline, say another 3 issues. If he wanted to break that down into, if it required it, into 2 more volumes, like instead of 3 issues, it would be 6 issues in order to get to the point. I think the story holds me enough where I'm interested enough to see where the story goes. Hopefully we get that though. But no more chit chat on this. I think we fussed enough over this. What would you rate it?
I'm gonna rate it a medium roast. Not just not because of the art. I think the art definitely does help my rating, but I give it medium mostly because I see so much potential in the writing. I think the story overall has a direction, and I want to see where that direction goes. And because I like the creators themselves, I am slightly biased, but I think genuinely I would like to see the story grow. I want to see what's next for these characters. I just need the story elements to get better. I think I'd give this 1 more volume. If nothing improves from what we've discussed here, I probably would end up dropping it at that point, but medium's where I stay.
I'm on the fence between medium and dark, honestly, but I'll give it a medium, because the art itself carried. I can tell it was a passionate artist creation, but there were several things with the writing that you could tell the art came first. I could tell in several pieces the art came first. So you have this idea, okay, they're Tuskegee Airmen, right? But they're like kids in the future, right? But I have these ideas for weapons, whether I do or don't. I'm going to put it in this art because it looks cool. Everything looked cool, but how do you get there? And if the journey to get to these elements doesn't lead up to it, then there's no real payoff. It doesn't match the emotion that gets there. There's such a stark contrast between the two. I'll settle on a medium because I at least finish issue 1 through 3. I saw the cover art for issue 4 though. I do want to pick that. The art is always going to get me for this. It's just too good. I'm more objective because I don't know them.
Yeah. But I'm interested to see what happens in issue 4. I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it does leave off on a pretty interesting cliffhanger. So I kind of want to see what happens from there.
It does. It does. But the cover art for issue 4, as I see from on their website, so TuskegeeAirs.com, you can actually see like the issues that come up, and it looks dope. I want to see. I do
definitely giving some Arcane vibes. Ain't gonna hold you.
Yeah, I do want to. It's one that you definitely, after like reading it and going through, you want to give it more chances. In spite of, so I'll settle on a medium. It's not one I'm like, I'll never want to read it, but yeah.
No, definitely not that. I would be willing to give this book a chance. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm very dedicated to hopefully seeing this book make some interesting changes. But without further ado, let's move over to the next book on our coffee table, issues 0 and 1 of Search for Sadiqah. Brief overview of Search for I'm so sorry, not sure what language I was trying to say, but nothing came out. Brief overview of Search for Sadiqah is basically, it's set in 1920s era, during I would say right around and in the actual era of the is it Black Wall Street? Did that also happen in Tulsa?
I could take this one over.
No, don't do that.
You did the first one. You did the first one. Let me introduce this one, because I'll tell you. I'll start off with the timeline. So it's specifically May through June of 1921 in Tulsa. It's directly before. I see
somebody took extra notes.
Yeah, we be reading and writing out here. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's immediately before the Tulsa massacre. That's where it first starts.
What he's doing. You just want to talk about it. Fine, go ahead.
Yeah, it's exciting, and it's from the same people. So of course, writer creator Greg Burnham, line work as mentioned before by Shannon Sapenter and Patricia I feel like that's DeGuison.
I feel
like that's DeGuison.
Don't ask me about any kind of language.
Yeah, I'll see if somebody pronounces it. But Patricia DeGuison also did coloring on top of the line work and lettering, cover art done by Marcus Williams as well.
Did everything.
Renaissance woman. Absolutely.
Full illustrations.
Yeah. So the as far as the backstory goes, you have Sadiqah, who it all revolves around. You also see her dad, Tim, who is the owner of the bank. Her cousin, who she grows up with, is Albert. And he's bullied. In I think issue 0 is the one that I saw, where Albert is being bullied by Vernell.
That's not an overview, by the way. It's starting
off.
No.
You have to
brief overview.
Let it breathe. So you start off in this era. This is before, because issue 0 starts before the massacre, and then issue 1 starts roughly after. So you start off first with Sadiqah already wearing boots with a dress, and Vernell and the Gru are picking on Albert or whatever. So you already see from the jump she's the type that's adventurous and kind of, tomboyish or whatever. A proposition is made. It really kind of parallels what happens with the Tulsa massacre. What happens before, what could have possibly led up to it. Like her dad is involved with it. Some tragedy befalls the family home after he denies a proposition from a close, quote unquote, close friend. And I do like issue 0s now, kind of a side note, because they're set, even though they're in the same time and place, you get two sides of a very similar coin or question. So it all revolves around the fact that she, post-tragedy, is the only one in her family that escapes her home secretly after this denied unfair proposition gets presented to her dad. And they're trying to put it all to rest by finding her, but she doesn't realize how special she is quite yet. By the time you get into issue 1, she has this companion that she doesn't even understand. It's not a person, it's a thing, it's a familiar that's trying to guide her towards California for some reason, and her journey forthwith to really discover why she's being searched. It's not just we left the girl, it's we've left the girl. So you start at the very beginning. So diving into it, as far as the individual elements, let's start with the artwork. Mind you, it's by the same hands from Tuskegee Heirs, but
no, like, because Marcus for Search for Sadiqah only did the
cover art.
He didn't do the actual like interior. However, I will say the interior art is very reminiscent of Tuskegee Heirs. Definitely has the same level of artistry, skill, all that good jazzle mazz. Yes, I said jazzle mazz. Don't judge me. I think if I like I said, the art in both of these comics is literally no notes. But if I could highlight some of my favorite parts of Search for Sadiqah, I love how it kind of, the whole comic until you get to issue like the very end of issue 1 almost has this like grayscale-y sepia, not grayscale, this sepia overcast of like you're watching an old-timey movie. To me anyway, it definitely had like that look to it. And then when right after, you know, tragedy strikes for her, everything kind of comes into color. I liked all of that. I liked that about the art. I liked that of, just like with Tuskegee Heirs, diversity on 10. Everything looked beautiful. I just, the character design, top tier, everything. It's a very good art. Just that's it. That's all I got. It's very good art. There's really nothing else to be said about it other than it's very good art.
It didn't overpromise. The cover art didn't give a weapon we never saw. Respectfully, it's not a dig, but like when you see what's on the front. No, I'm just saying, when you see what's on the front, it keeps it very I think it's issue 0 that has, it's just her standing in like a room where there's shadows in the doorway. Was that 0 or 1? No, it was 0. It was 0 because I read that second.
It wasn't a room. I think she's on like a ship.
Not on a ship. She's in like a tavern because you see tables and like a bar in the back.
Was that the tavern for issue 1?
I think but the way I saw it, she ended up in that room in that position. So it was, instead of doing like an abstract concept art that kind of hints at elements you might see, she gets into that room at some point. So that specifically promised, and it's a very minor thing that I'm only pointing out because I've seen, as an avid comic book reader, where sometimes they might do like a family portrait, right? They might do like a family portrait. Like, imagine if Tuskegee Heirs had the family portrait concept art where they're all sitting around a plane. That is one of their variant arts, which would have been a great one for the front cover art. But for Sadiqah, both issue 0 and 1, I don't know if they have any more now, but issue 0 and 1 kept it very straightforward. And hey, this is Sadiqah with a dragonfly next to her. And then you see Sadiqah and a dragonfly next to her very early on.
That's true.
Sadiqah in a bar room. Sadiqah is in that bar, prepared to fight like she looks. So it goes, this is what's going to be in the story. Here you go. And it's going to look just as good. And it does. So that little bit goes a long way.
Certainly does. I can see where you're coming from there. I think that another thing that the art does really well of selling the story is that there are moments in the stories. I specifically speak of the scene, and John, you'll know what scene I'm talking about. Issue 1 at the very end, where homegirl is in the cell. Dude's looking through the cell and there's just overcast over her. And you don't know where she's been the entire issue. It's those moments of this that just chills, and nothing had to be said. Nothing was really said in that moment. You don't even know. I'm not even going to tell you who it is or what happened, but just know that there's a scene at the end of issue 1 where you're just like, whoo, chills. You know, you just know that the next issue, everything gonna pop off. And I love that it does a really good job of cliffhangers in both the 0 issue and issue 1. It's a really good job, just the art alone, of saying everything that the dialogue doesn't even have to say. I really like that about Search for Sadiqah's art.
Yeah. It's this one has unity. That like the pacing doesn't go too fast.
Surely does not.
They picked enough panels for a question. Because nobody can really say, okay, if I want to make this bad guy look evil, is there a set rubric for how many pages or how many different panels you can put? You can have a goal, but when you're writing, you have pages and pages that you can write and paragraphs for a book. Comics are totally different. Sometimes you can see the mismatch where, like, say, for example, a writer that's used to putting out novels is now tasked with putting out a comic. You're going to have you may most likely have a lot of dialogue bubbles that are paragraphs, and then it becomes distracting because they're used to writing like that for emotion to convey. But for Search for Sadiqah, they nail it. They nailed showing her interesting. They nailed showing her defending her cousin. And then, okay, we flesh that. We show how he is. Where does he go in issue 0? Then issue 1, does he show up? Does he not? Each of the minor characters, like Miss Helen, who was her teacher.
Cool. That sounds more. Are we in the story now? Are we discussing story elements? I thought we were still doing
Oh, artwork. My bad.
No. It's good. I was with you, but I was just like, homie, where are we at?
My bad.
No, you good. It's cool. Shifting straight into story. You're right.
Yeah. So now we're switching to like, the story itself. Switching to characters. So I was going into how the characters kind of grab me as far as unity goes. Because the thing is, it matches with the artwork, matches the characters, the story and pacing, and the page layout and flow. There aren't many notes on it because it worked. So as we transition into talking about each element that we appreciated for what we read and observed, what are your thoughts on it?
For the overall story, I gotta say, Search for Sadiqah absolutely surprised me. I consider myself to be quite the lover of what is that called? Historical fiction. Historical fiction is a small guilty pleasure I never talk about. But I love historical fiction. From freaking Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, super stupid, but I loved it. I love if you're talking about comics, another indie, Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer, loved it. I love period pieces. So Search for Sadiqah hit me right in my heart because I was just like, ooh, it's a historical fantasy. Love it. And it really did a good job of taking the historical, because sometimes you'll get to historical fantasies and like they'll just completely take out all the historic part of the fantasy. Like it could literally be set in like 1832 and in America, and they're like, oh, black people are just free around this piece, like no Jim Crow. And I'm just like, bro, what are we talking about?
I've seen that happen.
Really, really puts your mind like, what are you doing, bro? Like, niggas was in chains. Why do you have this black man walking around here like it's cool? So I loved that you really had this, you have this historical fiction where it's set in this story. And even though it was fictional elements to it, that was kind of believable. Like, because we always hear stories about like Tulsa and how it was Black Wall Street and what it was like to be in Tulsa before the Tulsa massacre happened. We always hear about like these black wealth, these places of black wealth and these places of black excellence and black peace during these times and in the early states. And it just seems so intangible for us now, or at least in my personal opinion. It almost feels intangible. But seeing Sadiqah happy, her daddy's a banker, her mom's a stay-at-home wife, she goes to a private school, and like she was living the life, like as good a life as you possibly could have gotten in the 1920s for a child. Like it was really, it was very refreshing. It was very refreshing, not kind of, absolutely refreshing. But also how the story plays into the Tulsa Massacre, into the narrative. Like it didn't seem like they tried to force the two together. They seemed like actual pieces that could have happened. Like Sadiqah's story absolutely definitely could have happened or did happen during the Tulsa Massacre. That's what it felt like. From the way the dad interacts when he's talking about, losing his bank or giving over the bank, to the way the teacher talks about her, even like she talks about how she said wet cornbread or something like that. I don't know what exactly that was. She talks about like eating like a kind of cornbread, and it was like wet, and I was just like, ew, nasty. Who eats wet cornbread? But in the 1920s Tulsa, wet cornbread was the bee's knees, and she liked it. And I was like, yeah, I loved it. I just loved how everything felt so tangible. It made me very happy. And also I loved Sadiqah as a character. She was this bubbly, bright, hardworking child, and you could see like she's the only girl, so there was a lot of different like small tropes that were put in. Nothing felt like Black trauma. Everything felt like honest. Like this is Black people in the 1920s. This is what this kid went through. She's an overachiever. Here's her story. And no notes. I liked it. I really liked it. I liked how she talked. I liked how she walked, and I loved her interaction with other characters. I think if I had to notate anything, there are some moments that felt super cartoony, but I still laughed. I still super enjoyed it, specifically when Albert is getting bullied. There are some moments where I'm just like, really? Why does this sound so cartoon, so Tom and Jerry-ish to me? My personal opinion, no one crucify me. I personally felt like these moments felt kind of not necessarily like an adult writing a child piece, but definitely like I don't know. I don't really know what to expect out of bullies. Maybe I'm just being too hypercritical at this point. I mean, they're bullies. They're child bullies. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes they just plain don't make sense.
They just don't make sense. So that's why I'm just like, I'm probably being hypercritical here.
Yeah.
But that would be like my only. Don't me. You're not supposed to agree.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely have different things to say. I'm just letting you have your moment.
Oh,
I was just reading through some of kind of the notes I had for the story plots. And I do love the fact that you could tell research was done. And it's those little parts in historical fiction where you're like, this is fiction, so it didn't happen. But then you see all these little elements that tie it, and you're like, did it? Right?
Did it?
Did it? Wet cornbread? Yeah, who else knows about that but them, right? There were some parts with like, even though the plot, of course, start to finish for the first 2 issues alone, it accomplished a lot. Not just setting out a lot of elements, it accomplished a lot so quickly. As far as like dialogue goes, because the devil's in the details. Sometimes Michael's dialogue seems really short. When I think it's issue 1, where it's like the guy, the one that set up the bad proposition to the dad. It's like, your father sent me, like, after the whole tragedy. Something else could have maybe fit there a little bit, but I'm just nitpicking because there was so little to talk about. Or when Mr. Wood goes, you should have done it yourself. Mr. Wood being the evil Palomino dude, right? Over her dad's friend, like, should have done it yourself. If there's that felt off. Now there was one specific part when they get into the whole bar fight and exchange. So Miss Helen starts at the door, and she's the one that hits Michael, because Michael is the guy that set her dad up. So on the page flow, she's at the door, she yells, Michael reaches for Sadiqah across the table. Helen runs past Michael, gets behind him, smashes him with the vase, all while he just doesn't get up. And then Sadiqah runs past. So that was a little choppy. It would have been different if Miss Helen was already in. All Miss Helen had to do was already be in the room, or someone else hits him with the vase that was already in the room while she comes in. Hey, you need to leave. But it was like you made Miss Helen do a 40-yard dash to get a vase to break him. Meanwhile, he's still like, if he's lunging, that's a 2-second thing. So he's lunging, can't reach, almost got it. Just to wait for a head base thing.
Maybe he's like slow hamstring running. Like you think
he didn't run. He just sat there the whole time. Yes. Come on, Sadiqah, I'm almost in your range and in your reach. I think I almost. It just would have been awkward in real time. My brain couldn't calculate that. It just didn't. That part didn't make sense. But besides that, there weren't any like mismatched moments of like having font for onomatopoeia, but they used pow too many times in my head. They were like, you could have done thwack, you could have done, like pop, and like just vary it up just a little bit, but nobody's gonna notice the difference. All these things I'm mentioning now were like, it's not even a note to take back, but it's something I noticed going through it because punctuation too. Punctuation, grammar, using the wrong your or you are.
I can't really talk about punctuation just because I am exceptionally bad at grammar and punctuation. However, comma. See how I put that comma there? However, comma. I definitely noticed that while reading through. It's something to take into consideration, I think that one of the things I've noticed as we've gone through so many different comics so far, from indie to, from small indie to big name indie, is that mistakes in production, or at least I think that mistakes in production happen. It just does. You have your editor, you have 2 editors, you have 3 editors, everybody goes through and they're like, yeah, this is the good stuff, this is the meat. And, the book gets printed and next thing you know, you have someone on a podcast on Spotify saying, yeah, you use 3 different theirs and 3 different in the wrong context every time.
Yep. That's what, yeah.
It happens, it sucks and you try to move on.
Just get an editor. Just get an editor.
Yeah, just get a do your multiple reviews, do your editing. I think I can say that about a handful of the comics that we've had on the show. The one thing I would want to say to indie creators is make sure you have an editor, someone that's not you, someone that's not your friend, someone that either A, has low stake in your comic, or do what is it called? Or do a test subject, someone to read your comic and script, someone who's not really familiar with your brand or whatever you're trying to put out, and have them read it all the way through and give you that, and give you basically what does it feel like as someone who's reading this for the first time. I think all of that will save you tons of embarrassment if you get someone who's super famous saying you used the wrong your, or just could save you some, make your book that much better, make your book that much cleaner. Give us that much less to talk about your book. But overall, I think Search for Sadiqah was a solid book.
Yeah.
Well, 0 and 1. 0 issue and 1, but solid books.
Yeah. And I have that exact same sentiment. It's good. It's a good one. I was happy to read it. I couldn't even wait to tell someone else about it.
I know. You stopped my whole overview of the comic. At all.
So do it right now. Do it right now. Be bold. I'll just edit that out.
I just icky. All I'm saying is, where are we at now? Actually, we are now at the rating. What would you give this book, Lloyd? Since I said it all last time.
It's espresso.
You think it's espresso?
I think it's espresso.
I'm going to go with blonde roast. Only reason why I'm going blonde roast. Now you're like, you just gave this book high praise. Only reason why I'm going with Blonde Rose is I think that I want to see a little bit more from the story. I think the story is playing it safe. And you have to read it yourself to get what I'm saying. I think the story is playing it safe. I think the story is about to pop off, but I don't know yet. I don't know if they're going to take the safe route, the predictable route, or if they're going to switch some things up on me. So for right now, it's a blonde, but it is a very high blonde. Like, this thing is almost an espresso, but I will be telling other people about it.
You need to see it take a risk.
Yes, I want to see the story. Like, this is just, I'm very hypercritical when it comes to this, but listen, y'all, I read so many comics in a day, so many comics in a week, in a month, in a year. I have so many stories in my head, and sometimes stories become forgettable. And a lot of the reason why a story becomes forgettable is not because it's bad, but because it didn't take a risk in its story that didn't do something in the story that made it memorable for me. Search for Sadiqah on its own is I think it's a very solid story. But in the sea of other stories that I read, I think that because of where it's at right now, it could take a risk. And I think it'll be that much better and make it that much more memorable for people when we're talking about indie greats. We're talking about, like, when we're talking about Black indie people, I can say, oh yeah, blah, 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 and Search for Sadiqah. But right now, I don't know. Sometimes Search for Sadiqah is not the first thing that comes in my mind. But doesn't mean it's a bad book. I highly suggest, actually, I really do highly suggest anybody to read both Tuskegee Heirs and Search for Sadiqah. I think both are decent reads. Tuskegee Heirs is a decent read. Search for Sadiqah is an amazing read. If you want to get a copy or read Tuskegee Heirs for yourself, go to TuskegeeHeirs.com, grab yourself a copy for Search for Sadiqah. Where is Search for Sadiqah available, Lloyd?
I believe Search for Sadiqah. Well, Tuskegee Heirs had its own website that you could purchase from. I think Search for Sadiqah. You might be.
If I'm not mistaken.
You can actually still get it from TuskegeeHeirs.com.
Okay, you can. I thought so. Wasn't sure. So you can get Search for Sadiqah off of TuskegeeHeirs.com as well. Like I said, it's pretty much by the same people. So, that's going to be there. And yeah, that's pretty much all that's on our coffee table today. These were overall, I think that these books are great. I would recommend anybody who has kids and you're like, I don't want my kids reading all that.
Or you just need a good Black representation. A hero, or just something that, like, these we're looking at from adult minds, but kids would eat this up. Where it's like, this is
chomp a dump, womple lit up, and eat it for more than dessert. Don't make it gross. Right. Don't make it weird, Mikasa.
You already did.
But that's all we have for this episode. Thank you guys again for all of your love and support through all of these episodes. I can't say that enough. We really, really, y'all just keep loving us. Y'all keep showing us. Shout out to the one person from Germany and Japan. I was checking our analytics and I saw that someone from Germany and Japan is listening to the podcast. What's up?
Hey.
Konnichiwa. I don't know any German, so
okay.
But don't get. Thank you.
No. I was saying. That was me stopping. I was like, but don't get that accent wrong. That was not. Oh, no, nothing offensive. No. Say konnichiwa. Well, time to go.
We're done. We're gonna wrap this up. Okay. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Black Coffee Comics podcast. We love you. If you want to find me on socials, it's Black and Culture official, except for on Twitter.
On Twitter.
I'm dying, bro. Except for on Twitter, my name is still Black and Culture, but if you find my name is now Captain Black of the Nightskins Militia, that's still me. That's still me. I just changed my name. I just changed my name. Don't laugh at me.
No, it caught me off guard. You didn't tell me.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the TLDR as quick as I can.
Black of the Nightskins.
As quick as possible, I can tell you this. So apparently, there are some anime fans out there that don't like that black voice actors are dubbing anime. So apparently it's this new like slang slur term to call black people night skins. But I don't know about you, but night skins kind of sounds like a dope ass power, and I just
Kidding me? Light skins and night skins? Oh my gosh. I'll be a part of that battle. I'll be part of that battle.
I
Yeah.
said I am now Captain Black of the Nice Skins militia.
Okay.
Sector 10. Don't question it.
Warn
just
me
what-
before you say that shit.
But yes, but it's still Black and Culture or Black and Culture official on all socials. And what about you, Josh?
All right. So yeah, you can find me very, very, very simply for the majority of the social media. So it's space Lloyd 8, 2 L's. Don't forget it. Space LLOYD, the number 8. You could find me on Twitch where I stream all the time, usually Monday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Even D&D might be on there too. Twitch and Instagram and Twitter are all Space Lloyd 8. On Facebook, you could even catch some of my gaming clips at Space Lloyd Gaming or on YouTube at Space Case Camp. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you guys again for listening. And you've been listening to the Black Coffee Comments podcast. Check us out whenever we drop our next episode. Love y'all. Bye.